Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. The fourth verse of the famous Mormon hymn, Praise to the Man, reads as follows. Sacrifice brings forth the blessings of heaven. Earth must atone for the blood of that man. Wake up the world for the conflict of justice. Millions shall know Brother Joseph again. It's a striking verse for sure, but I'm focusing in on that first line since it's a major theme in my journal this week. The idea that sacrifice results in blessings. Sacrifice, suffering, the refiner's fire, enduring to the end, this principle is core to Mormonism. And as we get into my weekly journals, we'll learn firsthand what Sister Allen, the wife of my mission president, taught about how sacrifice and suffering result in godly change and divine intervention. So I want to kick things off today with the declaration that suffering does not build character and is actually generally inadvisable. I could argue this for days, but let's focus in on one major argument. Adverse childhood experiences, or in short, ACEs. If you're curious, the original ACE questionnaire is only 10 questions, and I've linked a website where you can go take it in the description. But lest we get very technical, I will set aside the specifics of what would be an adverse childhood experience and just focus on the effects of them. So from an article discussing the leading psychologist's research, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, on the subject of adverse childhood experiences, this author, Phoebe Hall, explains the effects as so. Quote, from an evolutionary perspective, a stress response is a good thing. If you're being chased by a tiger, your body releases adrenaline and cortisol to help you flee. Pulse and blood pressure go up. Glucose floods the bloodstream. Energy is temporarily diverted to the muscles and brain and away from processes like digestion, growth, and reproduction. Once the danger is past, you return to baseline. But if your body is constantly responding to stressful events. This is what happens to some children who are abused or neglected, witness domestic violence, lose a parent, or experience household substance abuse or mental illness. Known as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, they may cause toxic stress, a constant revving of the stress response system that wears down the body and brain, setting them up for a host of problems down the road. Studies associate childhood trauma and adversity with cellular aging, elevated stress hormones and inflammation, a weakened immune response, and disrupted brain development. The impacts of those biological changes can be far-reaching, from an inability to form relationships or pay attention in school, to risky behaviors like drug use and unprotected sex, to social problems like crime and poverty, to diabetes and cardiovascular disease, psychiatric disorders, and early death. Unquote. So, at least in my very black and white thinking Mormon missionary brain, this information about how stress, especially long-term stress, can be very bad for your body, this would have been a pretty strong red flag that suffering is not necessarily good for people. Unfortunately, this is not the information I was given on my mission, alas. But since sacrifice doesn't bring forth the blessings of heaven, why would a group tell people that it is important to sacrifice? Why was I being taught this on my mission? Why was I being taught that it's good to suffer and it's good to sacrifice? I'll tell you why. It's because the more you give to something, the more you give to a group, the harder it is to leave. And you don't have to take my word for it. I found an article by an expert on Psychology Today to give a more thorough explanation of this idea. This is a little bit of a long quote, but it's not crazy long. Okay, here we go. Imagine devoting your life to a cause because you believe the world will end on a specific date. You give up friends, career, goals, and aspirations. The date comes and nothing happens. It's easy to assume believers would then abandon the idea. Yet many double down on their belief. Why? The answer lies at the heart of how cults gain and keep control. Cognitive dissonance theory, famously articulated by Leon Festinger in his 1956 book, When Prophecy Fails, explains why people justify increasingly extreme behaviors to preserve a coherent identity. When our actions don't match our values, we have a nagging sense of discomfort. We may know we shouldn't speed, but justifying it by telling ourselves we're late, yet the unease persists, what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. We want our thoughts and actions to align. According to Festinger's theory, the discomfort motivates us to reconcile the inconsistency. We might change our behavior slightly or add a new explanation to justify existing actions. In other words, we rationalize. Cults are masters of exploiting cognitive dissonance. They typically don't recruit new members by immediately demanding extreme things. Instead, they start small. Here's how it works. If a leader can get someone to take a minor action that is in step with a group, that action creates pressure for the person to view the group more favorably. Asking someone to attend a group study is much easier than asking someone to cut off their family and move to another location. Backing out at more extreme asks then would mean admitting prior actions were misguided, which, due to dissonance, becomes hard to swallow. Public commitments are especially potent, and cults capitalize on them. They know that if they can get people to act first, their minds will follow. For example, a recruit might be asked to volunteer for long hours. If at first they feel unsure, they may justify the effort. The slight unease of dissonance is resolved by doubling down on positive feelings about the group. So if we bring this back to the hymn where this began, the hymn focused on declaring allegiance to Joseph Smith, the founder of the LDS Church. It's weirdly in line with this topic of doubling down after cognitive dissonance and sacrifice. So here we have an instance of people who have been slowly drawn into a group, then things have escalated, and now this really big major event happens. Their leader is killed. And while some people did leave the church at this point, many more were even more dedicated. After everything they had sacrificed, after all of the suffering, it was too painful to believe that their leader had been fallible, that they had been perhaps misled, that God was not in charge. So, grand meaning was made out of what happened. Joseph became a martyr in their minds, and to this day, this song is sung with very proud fervor. Now, I definitely have more to say on this topic, but since this is a bit of a doozy of a long journal entry week, I'm going to save it for when it comes up. So, let's jump in. I've been having a great time working on this project, and it takes me a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, your donations are really helpful, and they're really effective at communicating to me that this has been valuable for you. Of course, I have the disclaimer that your donations will not bring eternal salvation for you or anyone else. There are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation or sign up to be one of my monthly patrons to support this and my other creative work. Thank you! And let's get back to it. Monday, May 25th, 2015. Memorial Day, Mission Day 227. So we totally drove to Custer last night, mostly because Sister Luck wanted help digging a trench today. But it was raining really hard, so they called to cancel. At least we had a lesson here with Doug last night, so it wasn't a waste of miles to come. I was actually super excited to dig a trench for Memorial Day. It was nice to have a morning to study, though. We got to spearfish about 12 o'clock when we had lunch and got ready for the day. Kara said she'd actually love to meet with us, except we forgot to bring Michelle Dalton with us, so it ended up not working out. We didn't get to meet with Marvin, which was sad, but we had a lovely dinner with Laura after visiting Brother Hyde in the VA. I want to visit people in nursing homes and hospitals after my mission. Go once or twice a week to sing a song and share a scripture. It does me a lot of good. Happy Memorial Day! And then at the bottom of the page, I had drawn and colored in with colored pencils a picture of the special Memorial Day breakfast that they do in my hometown that I was very sad to be missing. Okay, so not a ton to talk about besides I will explain. Normally Monday is the P Day where we're doing P Day stuff, but it was changed to be on, I think, Wednesday this week due to our big zone conference that's coming up on Tuesday. I guess it was rescheduled in case people had to drive up to the area or something and on Monday, and they didn't want them to miss their P Day or something. The main thing I'll point out about this day is just how apparently we went to visit some people in a hospital or nursing home and sang for them and read them the scripture, and I really liked it, and I was like, yes, I want to do this after our mission. And I said that it does me a lot of good. And looking back on that, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't think that's a bad thing to do, right? I think that's a nice thing to do. Although it just feels maybe a little bit telling that the closest thing I had to sort of like self-care and like having time doing things that mattered to me and things that were fulfilling and meaningful to me was when we got to go sing for people in a hospital. Like, yeah, it was cool to get to do that, and it was nice to be of service and nice to, help people not feel lonely, but my goodness, that's not really the best, like, relaxing, re-energizing activity, if that makes sense. Like, I think if I can go and sing for people in a hospital, help them feel better, great. But probably after that, I'm going to be kind of tired and I'm going to need a while to like sit and rest and maybe read something or play a game. Do you get what I'm saying here? It's like not super recharging. And I definitely had the concept on my mission that I didn't need to recharge. I didn't need to rest. All I needed to do was lose myself in the service of others and the service of God, and that's what would be totally good for me. Not very balanced, right? Also, just gotta shout out how Memorial Day and my Memorial Day traditions are most people don't really care about Memorial Day, I think, but it's really big for my family, and it was very sad to not be a part of it. And I just gotta honor that for little sister Finlandson. But let's keep going. Because I went to Zone Conference and I took a lot of notes. Okay. Tuesday, May 26, 2015, mission day 228. Zone conference today was amazing. Best one yet. Quick notes on what I love from yesterday's leadership training. The assistants to the president trained us on effective district meetings, and I learned quite a few helpful things myself. Resolving concerns with role plays, preparing for trainings, extending commitments, really handy training type moves. I also learned about the role key indicator goals are supposed to have. They should be backed by names and plans. They should be stretching but attainable. And all of district meeting is supposed to be focused on giving us the skills and motivation to be able to reach our goals. Sister Allen bore powerful testimony of using the Adjusting to Missionary Life booklet, which I've never really opened at all, so I'm going to get going on that. And President Allen connected the principle of using leading questions to teach 50% of learning by faith. D&C 88-118 reads, quote, "And as all have not faith, seek ye diligently, and teach one another words of wisdom. Yea, seek ye out of the best books words of wisdom. Seek learning, even by study, and also by faith." Unquote. So how does someone seek learning by faith? The opposite of learning by doubt. Instead of trying to prove something wrong, try to prove it right. Experiment on the word, Alma 32:27. Live it and see the good fruit that results. Innocent until proven guilty. Doubting your doubts before you doubt your faith. You receive no witness until after the trial of your faith. We receive answers when we seek in faith. Why is that? Well, if you seek in doubt, you don't really want to know. Moroni 10:40. But if you choose to want it, if you really have the desire, if you knock, it will be opened unto you. God's not going to force us to know something. He gave us our agency. So we need to choose whether or not we'll seek for light and truth or seek to tear it down. As teachers, we need to focus on building faith. Our questions should motivate them to act in faith. For example, how will learning that the Book of Mormon is true help you with this question? All right, I'm going to pause there. Wow. So there's so much that I could talk about, but if I talk about everything that I want to talk about, this will just be way too long. So I'm gonna unfortunately skip over some of the things that would be very interesting to discuss and just pick a few. So first of all, I mentioned Sister Allen. I gave Sister Allen 2 sentences, and then President Allen this whole big paragraph, which just goes in line with, I typically was less excited and less impressed by what my mission president's wife was telling us to do than what our mission president was telling us to do. And when I go to these meetings, I often, afterwards, I took separate notes in my study notebooks during the meetings, and I would write as fast as I could and transcribe almost word for word what everybody said in the meeting. But then when I go back to write it in my journal, I'm not giving women the same amount of space as I gave the men typically. It's just, a perhaps discouraging but not surprising pattern I've already noticed as I've gone back to read through my journals. So I'm just pointing that out again. Sister Allen talked about some booklet, Adjusting to Missionary Life. Not very, wow, she could have been given a better, more exciting topic to talk about for sure. But also, I was like, whatever. sure, I'll do that. And then I just like kept writing down every random little phrase that he said, even if it didn't totally make sense, because it just all felt so wise. And it's really weird, because I remember learning about how to ask questions to teach people and feeling really kind of like self-important about it or something, like kind of self-righteous about I guess just kind of judgmental, like going forward in life after this. I would be very like judgmental about the kind of questions like professors and teachers and that, people trying to teach something. I was judgy about how they would ask questions, because I was like, there's like a whole psychology of how to ask good questions. But I kind of like, at this point in life, I had forgotten what it was specifically that on my mission I learned. Like, how did I learn? What kind of questions did I learn were good on my mission? And, oh my goodness, it's the definition of I wrote down leading questions. Like, by definition, the point of the question is to not allow honest, open inquiry. The point of the question is to direct somebody's thought process and say, they were literally training us to say, to think, okay, I want this person to have this outcome. I want them to be committed to a specific outcome. So I'm going to ask them, I'm going to specifically frame the question and frame the way that I ask them to make it so that they come to the same conclusion that I want them to come to. So, like, for example, the example I wrote here was, if we're trying to get someone to read the Book of Mormon and they're not reading it and they have a question in life, well, we're like, okay, so you've got this problem and what we want you to do is read the Book of Mormon. So the question we would ask them is, we would say, how will learning that the Book of Mormon is true help you with this question? Thus leading the person to say, well, let me think about it. I guess if I learn that the Book of Mormon is true, then I will be able to get God's advice on this problem I have in my life. And then we'd be like, yes, exactly. We trap you with your own circular logic of a blessing that you want, that if you do this thing that we're asking you to do, you'll get, right? Like, do you see the trap there? Do you see the intellectual dishonesty? Because I do. But the way that it was framed was so sneaky that at least maybe some more skeptical missionaries, or missionaries who were a little bit less bought in, or perhaps missionaries who were a little bit newer, maybe they were a little bit more wary of what this was, but I totally bought it, because this was framed as a way of learning. The scripture said the scripture that's supposedly the words of Jesus, Doctrine and Covenants, it tells us to seek learning by study and also by faith. And our mission president's like, well, here's this dilemma, because we know how to learn by study, right? We all know how to go out and study and figure something out, but how do you learn by faith? And so then he creates this problem, and then he uses leading questions to solve the problem of how to learn by faith, which is assume something is right, act and wait to see what happens, focus on building the faith of the people that we're teaching by getting them to act and be faithful, and then see the results. And I thought that was so smart and so wise, and I did not know that's like the definition of getting someone to get sucked into a group through the use of manipulation and cognitive dissonance. Because what did we just learn? We learned that if somebody gets is convinced to do just some small thing, and then they do it. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they're asked to do something else and something else. This process of getting into a group or ideology or anything really by taking smaller and smaller steps into something and getting more and more, giving more and more of yourself to something, it gets harder. You get sunk into it, and it gets to be embarrassing to say, wait, all this other stuff I did, I was being fooled, right? So, yeah. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith. Like, we were getting really primed to prime other people to be sucked in to a group without having the full awareness of what they were committing to, but just a little bit at a time we would sprinkle things until suddenly they were in it and it was too painful to give it up because, for one, they'd already made a lot of sacrifices. Maybe they lost some friends, maybe they stopped drinking coffee, maybe they gave up their Sundays off. And then also they've gotten all these promises that, oh, my family could be together forever, and oh, like, God is helping me with all these problems, and I'm getting this big group of people who love me, and I don't want to give that up, right? Tricky, tricky, tricky. Not good, not good, not good. Okay, I'll keep going. This was President and Sister Allen's last zone conference before they go home. It was also the last time for them to train in their motherland of Rapid City. That said, it was a tender time for all present. Elder Durfee, an assistant to the president, gave a sweet training on overcoming discouragement through consecration. Jesus Christ, for example, was able to overcome everything perfectly with his establishing a set of base principles for his life. He always did the will of his Father, he always turned out to help and serve others, and he was well prepared by study. He was truly consecrated in his work. Quote, consecration means we keep trying, unquote. Elder D. Todd Christofferson. In Alma 38, 8-9, we learn that it is only through the aid of Jesus Christ that we can truly purify and consecrate ourselves. So keep on keeping on. Pray to submit your will to God's, then forget yourself and go to work. Develop a base of fixed principles. What do I want my mission to make of me? Then the assistants gave their combined training on working with and preparing members and the ward council. Preach My Gospel teaches us that to start with the bishop in building a relationship with the ward, that doesn't make sense. Preach My Gospel teaches us to start with the bishop in building a relationship with the ward. He has the members' trust, and what's more, he holds the keys to work in the ward and is entitled to inspiration as to who we can help. Sounds like a great resource to me. So how do we get to what we're aiming at? 1 Nephi 16:23 teaches that we must first prepare ourselves, then we can go to our leader and seek an assignment. The progress record is a great way to arm yourself. Be specific as you ask Bishop who you can help. Try, who are you working with? Who will be alone on Christmas? Or, has someone just moved in? Every time you see him, follow up with how your assignments are going. And try setting up an appointment about once a transfer where you can meet to establish expectations both ways and discuss what needs to be done. They also helped us brainstorm on how to effectively use the weekly progress record, so we're pretty excited for that. I'm really glad we're invited to the Spearfish Branch's branch council. It's hard to know what's going well when we're not involved in these meetings. Their final topic was on preparing members to teach in lessons and having good dinner appointments. Basically, what I need to do is get it out of my head that we just need a member's presence in the discussion. To do the best fellowshipping and missionary work, we need members active in each appointment they come to. And then don't hang out with members, but set expectations with them and help them with their missionary work. We had 11 missionaries plus one senior couple give their final testimonies. This time I actually knew quite a few of them. It gets harder to watch every time. It's always a little more tender than before. Elder Kingsley advised us to allow ourselves to even make an effort to be changed by our service. Elder Jordan talked about how pleasure lasts a day while joy lasts for eternity. He gave a cool way to remember. Spiritually minded is life eternal, or smile. 2 Nephi 9:39. Sister Vos said, quote, "Don't just go through the mission, but let the mission go through you." Elder Beltran spoke in gratitude for the relationship he has built with God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ. Quote, "Heavenly Father loves us, and he shows us that love through his Son." Sister Coolbrith's testimony was that the conglomeration of transitions that our missions are individualized refiner's fires mapped out specifically for each of us. Elder and Sister Sherman reminded us that we're now on some of the most important steps of preparation for our lives. And Sister Kiana got everyone crying as she sang, "I'm trying to be like Jesus." I'll miss having her around. All right, let's pause there. So going backwards, I was talking about how this was President and Sister Allen's last zone conference before they go home. So yeah, mission presidents, they typically serve, I think I'm going to do an episode focused on this, so I'll get the number for sure, but I think it's normally 3 or 4 years, but something like that. And it was coming up to be the transition time for a new mission president, and that was a big deal. So that was definitely, that was notable for sure. I gotta point out that it looks like I'm not the only missionary who is obsessed with this, like, consecration, giving away yourself, turning, forget yourself, go to work, submit your will to God, because there was one of the assistants to the presidents, which, remind you, is like the highest level of hierarchy that elders can get into as missionaries. They're basically the mission president's right-hand men, and they help with all this. They help with a lot of really high up stuff, and they're like the highest missionary authorities. So the stuff that the highest hierarchy of my fellow missionaries was telling me was to be like Jesus Christ and be able to overcome everything perfectly by living like Christ. And the missionary interpretation of what that was is always do what God says, always ignore yourself and focus on serving other people, and then be very focused on always consuming like scriptures, general conference talks, always be studying church stuff. And that was the model for how to be consecrated, and even how to not have discouragement, like how to overcome discouragement. Which we've already talked about a lot. Well, I guess I have talked about a lot, but here it is showing up again. I wanted to point out the talking about the ward council and the bishop and stuff, because I think probably even some LDS people don't know very much about the ward council, depending on like the callings you've been in. So I think the ward council is a somewhat newer meeting, you know, like from like the last 10 to 20 years or so, but I could be wrong. I haven't like looked up the history of it, but the ward council is like the bishop and I think the Relief Society president, the Young Women's president, maybe the primary president, then like the Elders Quorum president, probably Young Men's president. So like the different leaders of the various different organizations within the ward that are basically the groups of people in charge of teaching the adult women, the adult men, the teenage men and teenage women, and then of course kids, right? Like those different groups, and together they're supposed to get together to meet. I think it's like once a month, and they talk about at least when I was growing up, and I would go as a young woman sometime, like as a young woman when I was in the presidency in my young woman like Maya Maids or Laurels, I think I would go sometimes, and they would talk about how to help people, like how are we redeeming the dead, how are we strengthening current members, and how are we finding new people, something like that. So it was a very big part of Preach My Gospel missionary training to be really involved with the ward people and focusing on like, okay, the ward has, maybe they have a year-long goal of how many baptisms they want to have or how they want to be involved with missionary work. So like, let's not just only knock doors on our own, let's also be coordinating with the members and like helping them learn how to talk to their friends or like whatever, kind of just whatever, right? But working with them was the idea. And we were getting a special training on this because usually zone conferences would have trainings on different sections in Preach My Gospel, in addition to kind of just maybe whatever the mission president felt was relevant, but they really were, they would kind of go through different sections of Preach My Gospel to train us on it. And just it's notable that in this training, they were reminding us how important it was for us to work with not only the ward council, which is full of all the different leaders in the local congregation, but specifically with the bishop. And the elders, the assistants told us it's very important to have a good relationship with your bishop because, well, the members trust the bishop, which is very true, and not always good, not always safe for people. I've talked about that some, but also the emphasis on we need to build a good relationship with the bishop because he holds the keys to work in the ward and he's entitled to inspiration about who we can help. And this just shows how it's like the patriarchal hierarchy is in writing and in practice clearly laid out, where the man in charge of the ward is really the one who has God's authority and literal, like, the keys of the priesthood, which there's not actual keys, but that's what they call, like, when one person has the direct authority and permission from God for, like, revelation and inspiration over a group of people. They have keys, right? And that's the bishop. So even though I, as a missionary, was called and I had, like, the priesthood authority, if not, like, you know, I didn't have a priesthood office or anything, but I, like, had authority as a sister missionary, as a woman, to receive inspiration about the people in the area. The person who I was kind of getting that authority on loan from, and the person who would supersede me, was the bishop. because he really had like God's direct like okay. And I look back on that now, and I can see how I don't like it now, and I can see how it's definitely a devaluation of the kind of power that I felt like I had. But at the time I was like, yeah, this is just how it works. It's great. Also, I just wanted to mention how we were talking about there's a progress record, which was a document that was, I think, kind of in tandem with Preach My Gospel sort of documentation and stuff. And this was a record to help a standardized list of actions to take for people who aren't going to church very much and are maybe missing some ordinances, maybe haven't gotten the priesthood yet if they're guys or whatever. A standardized list of step, this person does all these things, and then we'll get them so that they're like as fully going to the temple and endowed and everything that they can be. That's the progress record. And the language I have in here it's either what I came up with, but I think it's probably what the assistants said in the training. And they said the progress record is a great way to arm yourself. And this was for like going to our leader and seeking an assignment, and then we're going to arm ourselves with a progress record. And the kind of militaristic, almost like violent leaning language of that is notable. And I would have seen this at the time, but I wouldn't have thought it was inappropriate, because in my mind and in all of the missionaries' minds, we were waging God's war. We were God's soldiers. So like, yeah, we did consider ourselves armed with the different like tools and strategies, etc. And I just think that's interesting. All things considered. Okay. Also, I mentioned that I was really glad we were invited to the Spearfish branch we went to. I mentioned I was really glad we were invited to that council meeting. And it's not always the case that missionaries are invited to the council meetings, especially if you're sister missionaries, because you don't have the priesthood. So I think it's more common for elders to be invited than sisters. And I don't know, I mentioned that we were invited to the Spearfish one, but I didn't say whether or not we were invited to the Custer one. So maybe we were invited to Custer, and we didn't have that line of communication with the people who were calling the shots. So that's interesting. Oh yeah, and then I guess I want to also point out that they were telling us off for hanging out with members too much, when like they were always like, when you're meeting with members and they're feeding you, you got to use that time so productively, and like stop just going to hang out with members for an hour and eat dinner with them and like maybe share a nice message, but like that's it. Like you need to go there and not be friends, but rather you need to go there and just be like drilling them and setting expectations with them that like you're going to be missionaries, and like you're helping them with their missionary work like the whole time, like very intensely. Don't hang out. So I could see that probably would backfire if that's what we really did, because thinking back to kind of my Mormon brain, but not on a mission, just like kind of my regular Mormon brain, if I was having missionaries over regularly for dinner, that's already probably really hectic. And then, but I'm like, well, it's the missionaries, I want to take care of them, and it's like nice for my kids to see them or whatever. But then if the missionaries are coming over and they're like drilling you and like trying to get you to talk to more people and being really pushy about doing missionary work, like I at least would be less inclined to have the missionaries over at all. Yeah, I think working with members and having productive missionary relationships with members, in my experience, it worked better when we did have at least somewhat human relationship with the different people, and not just totally like corporate salespeople, go, 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 you know? So I don't know. We'll see if they walk back on that later. and of course, the last thing from this section was just Sister Coolbrith, who is the sister that I got to hang out with while I was waiting for Sister Snow to arrive. She's just on theme with the weekly theme of sacrifice. You know, she said, our missions are a conglomeration of transitions, which is like, yeah, it is a lot of constantly changing. And she described it as an individualized refiner's fire that's mapped out specifically for each of us. And that's certainly how I would have seen it at the time too, you know, like hearing her say that, it would have felt really profound. But yeah, that's really how we all thought about, like, if anything happens to us, good or bad or just neutral, seemingly random, and if it's like fun or hard or stressful or whatever, that's all, so it's all supposed to be that way. This is, God knows all of our character flaws and foibles and and problems, and so he specifically cherry picks the problems that each of us will be facing throughout our days while we're missionaries so that we can grow the most, which was actually one of the concepts that led to me losing my faith in God at all. But at this point, I really liked it, and I really quite believed it, and it gave me a lot of comfort. Okay, we will continue. President Sayers, our Rapid City Stake president, spoke to us next. He started by what seemed like rambling, except it all sort of connected into his main message. Some thoughts I jotted down. Quote, our darkest times are a springboard to our greatest success. If you exercise faith in acting on your mission president's counsel, you will witness miracles. Give strict heed and observation to the leaders in your mission. Watch how they live their lives. Watch how they treat each other. Their example will be crucial in knowing how to treat each other as people in a district and as a companionship. You need to act as servants of God should, even when it's really hard. If you will do this, if you will care for, love, and treat everyone with respect, you'll be an incredible example to all those with whom you come in contact. And I can learn what I'm supposed to do if I counsel with the Spirit and my wife. That's how companionships work. Unquote. And then he talked about becoming a sacred missionary, which really got me listening since I've been thinking about that after a talk Sister Feist left. Sacrifice is more than giving up something good for something better. Quote, that which makes one holy, unquote, is running to holiness, running away from darkness to light. When we sacrifice, we are putting away from us things that keep us from holiness. I've been having the desire to be a consecrated, sacred missionary, and this is how I can. Run to the things that make me holy, learn by faith, treat the highest as well as the most desperate members of society with kindness, love, and compassion. As I do this, Heavenly Father will bless me and give me great strength. President Sayers' last area, before he was there, I guess on his mission, had been the worst in the mission. When he left, they'd had 12 baptisms in 4 months. Why did it change? What did they do? Quote, We loved each other. We loved the members, and we loved the people. If you pray, work diligently, are faithful and obedient, and most of all, love each other, you will be blessed with the Spirit in abundance. Your God will not allow you to fail." Unquote. And lastly, his direct words once again: "Be faithful to the words of your mission president. God will bless you and bless you and bless you." Unquote. Phew! Time for part 2, our trainings from the 2 sets of zone leaders. Sister Harris, Elder Witt, and Elder Walden focused on teaching with the Spirit. I was inspired to do so actively, especially by using silence and pointing out the Spirit. The Pierre zone leadership did a handy training on being bold, which I used to prepare to teach Marvin about the law of chastity. I'll probably just insert exactly what Sister Ellen said because it was amazing. Oh, I'm going to pause here because this is where we get the talking about sacrifice stuff. So let's review what President Sayers said. Obviously, a lot of gobbledygook, which I more or less said, but in a more fawning way. I said, he started by what seemed like rambling, except it all sort of connected into his main message, which is a very obedient, reverent, respectful missionary way of saying he was just saying whatever came to mind, and he maybe had some point he was trying to get to, and he had so much of an ego that he didn't mind just talking at us for half an hour and expecting us to rabidly write it all down and hang on the edge of every word. And looks like I did, because I wrote a lot of direct quotes. And there really are a lot of platitudes, a lot of like motivational office poster kind of things. You know, our darkest times are a springboard to our greatest success, etc. With a nice sprinkle of like kind of weird marriage relationship advice that's like a little like kind of misogynistic, but I don't even want to get into. But he's like teaching us how companionships are supposed to work and relating that to marriage, which once again I point out here is weird. How much when you're a missionary they're like your time with your companions is training you to be married. And yet the church is so homophobic that they're like, no one, you can't be married the way that the church recognizes, like spiritually, eternally married. You cannot be eternally married to someone with your same gender, like in the temple. So that's just like a weird thing to me. That feels weird to me. And also just that he said, this is how companionships work. I counsel with the Spirit and my wife. And on the surface, I'm like, yeah, maybe that's okay. But there's something about the choice of the word counsel with. It's not like, he's like, okay, I counsel with my wife and I counsel with the Spirit. But the choice of the word counsel, in my mind, leaves it up to him to decide for himself. Like he's the senior companion, he's the one with the priesthood, so he might talk things over with his wife, but she's just giving her counsel and her opinion, and ultimately he's going to be the one to decide for both of them, you know. I don't like that. Also, he says, you know, if you work hard and you're obedient, and if you love everyone, God will not allow you to fail in your areas. You'll baptize so many people, which is just it's just, those are not connected, not really, you know. They're this feels like a way of sort of pushing you into like emotionally manipulating you, the missionary, into, if you feel discouraged and you feel like things aren't going well, what you're going to focus on is just like, oh, I just don't love my companion enough, or we're just not obedient enough. And then instead of maybe thinking critically about the situation and the way that you're spending your time, and you're feeling maybe really discouraged and stuck in life, then you won't start to think about, do I even want to be here? You'll just be like, oh, it's not working. We're having a hard time. This sucks. I'm feeling very discouraged. So I'm just going to keep doing what they tell me, which is be obedient and try to love my companion more. Yeah, that feels a little manipulative to me. And he's got his own little, his own spin on the sacrifice thing, which is when we sacrifice, we're literally running away from darkness to light, which is just giving me I'm remembering how intense I was getting about, like, you know, not only being obedient, but like always remembering there's like, it's not just right and wrong, but there's good, better, and best. And if Satan can get me to just do what's better instead of best, like, that means I'm not running towards the light fast enough, and I'm like falling behind, and I'm like getting back in the darkness. So that's not healthy for at least my missionary brain. Let's keep going. We're close to the end here. I might be able to get this in one push. Okay, back to Sister Allen. I'll probably just insert exactly what Sister Allen said because it was amazing. So, on sacrifice, from Praise to the Man. Quote, sacrifice brings forth the blessings of heaven. So, what is sacrifice? What are we asked to sacrifice as missionaries? We give to the Lord whatever He requires of our time, our earthly possessions, and all of our efforts to further His work. Sacre, the root word, means to make sacred, and it is formed also in the words sacrament and consecrate. Elder Neil A. Maxwell said, quote, the submission of one's will is placing on God's altar the only uniquely personal thing one has to place there. The many other things we give are actually the things He has already given or loaned us. To become consecrated, we are required to sacrifice our will. To submit your will, is that frightening? Missionaries have always been required to sacrifice. Think of the missionaries in the early 1800s who left their families and, with nothing but their clothes, crossed the ocean. And these new missionaries baptized thousands. Missionaries have always been required to sacrifice. If they sacrifice their own desires for the Lord's, they find true happiness. Christ's advice to His disciples was to lose themselves in the work. King Benjamin is a prime example of a consecrated leader. From Words of Mormon 1:17-18, he labored with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul. It took a lot of constant effort on his part to teach. And what does he teach about? Mosiah 2, verse 21, we are unprofitable servants to the Lord, even if we're completely consecrated. Verse 22, but our Heavenly Father doesn't want us to be profitable. He created us. Verse 23, He gave us our lives, and all He desires is that we keep His commandments so He can bless us. Verse 24, we will be forever indebted to Him. The White Handbook reminds us, quote, you will also be expected to devote all of your time and attention to serving the Lord, leaving behind all other personal affairs, unquote. Why is this asked of us? What about in Mark 6, 7-8? Why did the Lord set them up to sacrifice? Our answer is found in Mosiah 3:19. As we put off the natural man by submitting our will, we become saints through the atonement of Christ. Sacrifice brings forth the blessings of heaven. And then her final quote, I hope you don't think of your mission as a sacrifice. I hope you cherish and love it. And then I wrote, Amen, Sister Allen. Okay, I am actually going to pause here again because this is the spiel that when I was reading through it again this week, that was like, I got to talk about sacrifice. I was going to talk about something else, and then I was reading through this and I was like, I'll have to do that other thing another week. Got to talk about sacrifice this week because this was just so formative. And we just got so much of this message, especially at this point in my mission. It's just coming up so much in my journal. I'm reading all these different talks that are saying this, and different people are telling it to us. And then Sister Allen, the like highest authority example of like a righteous good woman in my life at this time, you know, she's married to my mission president. She's telling me this too, and I really, really wanted to be just like her. So of course, you know, the ultimate thesis of her, or like the ultimate result, well, her overall thesis is that literally when we sacrifice it, through the power of God, through the power of Christ's atonement and the changing and saving power of Christ's grace and Christ's atonement, means that when we sacrifice, that allows God and Christ to change us, like fundamentally change our characters, change our natures, and give us the blessings of heaven. So there's like there's not only like a promise that it's good to sacrifice and that we ought to, but like this is the method with which God works in your life, is you sacrifice and then he can like give you blessings and change you. So it was like a very formulaic like thing that you could count on, thing you can specifically do. Which I guess at this point, so much was out of my control. Perhaps it was nice to have this thing to focus on to make me feel like I was in control. I'm purely speculating because my memory of this time is not feeling rebellious at all to like the constant obedience and feeling like it was nice to have people tell me exactly what to do, but I don't know what was going on subconsciously because I was repressing a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of things in here that I'm not even sure how accurate just the statements are, like the stuff about sacra and sacrament and consecrate. Like, I don't know if that's even right. I'm not going to look it up, but basically there's this promise that missionary, it's built into being a missionary that you're supposed to sacrifice because it's like an effective strategy and an effective method for God to like help us like be successful or whatever. And then there's this promise, if we sacrifice our own desires for what the Lord desires, that's how we would find true happiness. That's how we would become saints. And that's just literally, gonna make you very in with the group and very losing your own sense of everything, your own sense of autonomy, your own sense of authority. And it probably in some way does give you some sort of twisted sense of happiness, although it's probably very tinged with anxiety and hidden resentment. That's, my happiness when I was at my most faithful, like on my mission. I felt like I was really happy, but it was very conditional, and it was very like, I'm choosing happiness. Well, like probably mostly what I was actually, I was like cognitively choosing that I was happy, but like physically in my body, I was like so stressed, like afraid, angry, frustrated, tired. Like maybe occasionally I felt joy, but a lot of it was I was just telling myself that I was happy because it needed to be a choice. And then, of course, she spent that whole time talking about sacrifice and how important it is to sacrifice. And then she ends with this, like, kind of sweet thought, at the time I would have been like, oh, it's so sweet. But now I'm like, what the heck? You're getting mad at us for this after you just told us that we're supposed to do it? She said, I hope you don't think of your mission as a sacrifice. I hope you cherish and love it. So that, like, feels a little victim blamey to me. Or I don't know, she just spent like half an hour telling us it's so good to sacrifice and we just need to be, and then she just does a 180 and it's like, this better not feel like a sacrifice, actually. Okay. And let's finish up this zone conference. And the topic did not surprise me. Okay, here we go. President Allen gave a powerful training on why marriage, why family. He's good at being interactive with questions, even when we're sitting more formally in the chapel. I'd love to go into greater detail, but to be honest, I've been trying to catch up on this entry forever, and it is July 20th, 2015 today. So I'm just going to close by putting their final testimonies on how to raise a family. Sister Allen said, be nicer to your family, marry someone whose actions show honor in the priesthood, desire to attend church every Sunday, even on P weeks instead of P days, and then as a joke, that meant when you're on vacation, and also go to church. So desire to attend and actually go. Never be ashamed to live the part of a returned missionary. Live the part. Look the part. Keep your wholesome appearance and mannerisms. Be church clean, ready to serve. Always have family prayer together every morning. Have faith in the future. As long as you're living the right way, you can trust your Heavenly Father will lead and guide you. As a couple, always do the prayer circle together, meaning at the temple, at every opportunity. President Allen said, as long as you both keep your covenants, you don't both have to be returned missionaries. Be on the right side, side by side. Continue to genuinely love and befriend less active families. Practice complete fidelity before marriage, then live complete fidelity. Respect and be grateful for your attraction to your eternal companion. You can be married, go to school, and have children all at the same time. You can do it. Smiley face. Our greatest wish for you is to fulfill this plan. That's why we're on missions, so more families can be sealed. Our family wouldn't have survived without the church, without devotion to the kingdom of God. The way we will know we've been good mission presidents is when your grandchildren are endowed in the temple. Consider and remember the blessed and happy state of those that keep the commandments. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Which, yes, I did write in my journal. Okay, so going back over this, so by this point I had figured out that I liked to put my zone conference notes in my journal because it always felt so big and important and stuff, but I would take notes in my regular study notebook, and then I learned to just go back and transcribe and maybe paraphrase some things for my personal journal. So that's what I was doing. And I guess it went on for a long time because we got all the way to July 20th where I was writing some of this stuff. But yeah, of course, in the last training that President and Sister Allen give, they say, okay, what it's really all about, it's about marriage and family, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to tell you guys, well, you elders and sisters, they would get mad at us to say you guys. We weren't supposed to say you guys because it was too informal. So yeah, they would say, you elders and sisters, you need to go home, you need to get married, and particularly for the elders, as long as you both, you don't have to marry a returned missionary woman. It was more expected of us sisters that we would marry a returned missionary, but yeah. Lots of things that I don't love, but okay, I'm gonna focus in on two of them. One is the President Allen saying the way we will know we've been good mission presidents is when your grandchildren are endowed in the temple, which is just a good example of how there's pressure on each faithful Mormon to not only be your own good, faithful church member of the church, but also your children and your grandchildren, and everybody who is close to you and loves you, what they want for you is for you and everyone in your family to be sealed and active so that you can all be in heaven together. So there's just that element of like the pressure to not only yourself personally conform to everything, but also for you to get your whole family in on it. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, an extra shout out to the line, once again, President Allen gave about fidelity before marriage and complete fidelity after marriage. The unspoken word here is don't, he's talking about probably specifically to the elders, because in the church there's a lot more of it's like known and terrible that all the men struggle with pornography, and they don't even really talk about how some women also look at pornography, but like, the weird gender stuff going on there aside, just there's this there's an understanding of if you're LDS, if you're a traditional LDS Orthodox person, probably to this day, you believe that if you're not married yet and you look at pornography, you are being unfaithful to your future spouse, and you've broken the law of chastity, and you can have your temple recommend taken away, etc. And then also, if you're married and you look at pornography, that's like having an affair. It's like you have been unfaithful to your spouse. There are some people who get divorced over this. It's a really, really big deal, and there's lots of pressure, especially on elders, about like, do not masturbate, do not look at pornography, and they get in. It's like, depending on who your bishop is, if you're like not a missionary, it might not be as big of a deal. It could still be a big deal. There are some people who get excommunicated because they look at pornography, but that's not as common. But if you're a missionary, they're asking you about it, and they're checking in, especially a lot with the elders, and it's a really big deal, and you can get sent home early from your mission. So there's just one of the ways that specifically the elders are, I think, kind of, it's meant to be like a way that they're trying to keep the elders in check, I can't speak for the experience of male missionaries, because that's not my experience. Yeah, and I'm not saying that there aren't sisters who also, in the way I would have been framed, struggled to not look at pornography or masturbate, but it was definitely not talked about as much for sisters, like in the same way that it was like talked about a lot with the elders. So yeah, just overall a pretty indoctrinating meeting. Lots of unhelpful platitudes, lots of toxic messages, lots of blaming things. I could certainly go through and pick out all the ways that the different things that were being said were emotionally manipulative, but as we know, this is already really long and we don't need to do that. So I'll leave it there for now. Wednesday, May 27th, 2015, Mission Day 229. What an awesome preparation day. We helped Opal Gutierrez move from 7 a.m. to noon. We almost didn't help move, since that's totally not a normal P day. Thankfully, we decided to follow the spirit of the law so that we would be a blessing to the branch president. It was only President Stockman, his daughter Louisa, and her 2 young kids helping besides us, and we were able to take quite a few loads of things in our Jeep. It was pretty cool that all day we had perfect moving weather, cloudy and breezy and not cold, and about 20 minutes after we started lunch, we got a downpour that lasted pretty much the rest of the day, although it paused long enough for us to wash our car. So we did P-Day from 1 to the evening, and then we had dinner and packed and drove to Custer. And we got so much stuff done. They told us in training Monday night that we were supposed to deep clean this week, so Sister Snow detailed the car while I got obsessive with getting water spots off the shower doors. Smiley face. We took our car to a drive-in shop for an oil change, and while waiting, we got back to our apartment, we were totally locked out. It was pouring rain, but we had our umbrellas, so for the 30 minutes we had until the car was done, we looked at the nearby motorcycle dealership and walked through the flowers outside the grocery store. It was super fun. I love chilling with Sister Snow. I didn't get any nap or journaling in, but we had a pretty fun area call with Elder Buell. I guess we're having district meeting on Friday, so we can apply all the things we learned in zone conference. Okay. So my main things I want to say about this day were pointing out that we were allowing ourselves to kind of bend the rules a little bit, but it seemed important because our branch president was so overworked, and he was there with his daughter and 2 little children, and that was everyone who was helping this one lady move. So we were like, yeah, I think God would be okay with us helping. And then I didn't clearly state the connection, but I wrote it in here implying and like assuming that the reader would pick it up. So I made the connection that like after this happened, I was like, well, it was pretty cool that all day we had perfect moving weather, and then we took a break for lunch and it started raining. So it was like, okay, so in this case we followed the spirit of the law, which was AKA we broke the rules, but we broke the specific rules, but because it felt like a good idea, we didn't call it we were disobedient, we called it we were following the spirit of the law. How's that for mental gymnastics? I should certainly talk about that. And then the proof that God was okay with it was he made it so that it didn't rain until we stopped for lunch. So it's like, see, look, God, this is God's approval. But the funny thing is, I totally remember it was just a few months back that we were helping someone move in Scranton, and it was like a blizzard. So I don't know if I just didn't even think about that or if I blocked it from my memory or whatever, but it was like, well, how come God made the weather perfect this one day while the other time another time I helped someone move, he didn't. And now I'm like, well, it's because just sometimes, especially if it's May, if it's the end of May, it's probably pretty likely it's going to be like decent weather for moving, right? But of course I interpreted it as a sign of God's approval for breaking the rules in a way to be supportive of the branch president. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was how this is like literally not that much. Like if this was like a normal teenager having like their day off, this would not be considered very fun day. But because we got a chance to, we were doing we helped someone move all morning, and then we were doing our chores, we were deep cleaning our apartment, and then we were getting the car taken care of. Also, it rained and we got the car washed, which seems silly, but we had to get it washed every week, so we just did, even if it rained. But so yeah, we helped someone move, deep cleaning house, getting the car changed, and then since our apartment keys were on the car keys, we were close enough that we could go home, but we couldn't get in. So we just walked around in the parking lot of the grocery store, and we got to look at some motorcycles, and we got to look at some flowers, and it was so fun. It was like, oh, this is the most fun I've had in ages. This is so fun. I love chilling with Sister Snow. And looking back on that, I'm like, man, if only I could have had like a normal teenager life at this point, you know? Like that, it's very sad to look back at what felt so fun and realize how constricting and unfun and limiting. I even called the area call fun. Like, wow, no, that was not fun. My perception of what is fun was very, very skewed at this point. Thursday, May 28th, 2015, mission day 230. Today was sweet. We had 2 awesome lessons. We began applying our effective ward council training to ward coordination, and we got a lot of planning done. I was pretty sure it'd go awesome with Bonnie if we could bring a sister her age, and when Pearl came today, it really helped. We talked about faith. Ether 12:4, Alma 32:26-27, and Jacob 4:6 were our scriptures referenced. Bonnie totally knows how faith has grown, and she admires people with, quote, great faith, but she has a hard time seeing herself that way. It will really help to have her be friends with Pearl. We also had a sweet lesson with the Ikedas about faith. This morning, we didn't really plan for her since we were going over zone conference notes, so we just had the vague idea of going through as much of the gospel lesson as we needed. And we ended up just talking about faith, and it was exactly what Trent needed. Sister Snow bore a super powerful statement of how this isn't man's church, it is the Lord's church. And I even got to throw in learning by faith, and it was super sweet, and he felt I recognized the Spirit. I also, oh boy, brace yourselves. I also saw that I'm from a very intelligent family on accident, which was fun. ... smiley face. Okay, I guess I'll tackle that right now. So, I clearly don't remember writing this. I was very surprised reading this little this little throwaway statement here. When I was very cringing. I was very embarrassed reading this. I was like, oh man, I have to read another one of these things. This one's particularly embarrassing, but I'm not even sure what I was implying. I don't remember what I meant by I saw that I'm from a very intelligent family. I really hope that I didn't have some joke about how I felt like I was smarter than this family because like they weren't as invested in Mormon theology as I was, or I don't know, maybe, I have no idea. I wanna say that it was not some weird toxic, like, seeing myself as better than other people and be like, oh, my family's so smart. But that's probably what it was, because I'm saying stuff like this so much in my journals. So it's definitely, I definitely think this is a weird, like, red flag thing. I guess my best guess of why I would say something like this, just from what I know about how human psychology works, is one, well, I was still quite immature, and I was in a setting that was pushing for immaturity and kind of disrespect of other people, and I was being pushed to see myself as like a separate kind of state of being than like literally anyone else who wasn't a missionary, let alone like not a good active Mormon. So that was going on, but also I think I was probably starting to get a little bit more regularly kind of passive aggressively like mean and nasty about things, because have I talked about shadow work yet? Maybe. There's a psychological concept, I think Carl Jung, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up to be sure. That's a concept that the more of our like full self and full beliefs, full whatever experience that the more of that we repress, and the more that we tell ourselves there are ways that I'm allowed to be like happy and confident and joyful and peaceful, and there are ways that I am not allowed to be, which are tired, sad, angry, whatever. The more that those forbidden ways start to like kind of subconsciously, or like without our awareness necessarily, just kind of they ooze out of the way that we react with other people and relate with other people anyway, because it becomes so impossible to really hide every aspect of yourself. So I guess my example of the flip side of this is, as I have been learning in therapy and like really truly getting to the point where I actually believe that it's okay to be angry, and I don't just say it's okay to be angry, but I'm like actually now experiencing that when I am angry, I can like notice it and I don't immediately panic, and I can even like tell my spouse that I feel angry in that moment. So as I'm getting to that point, I'm noticing that there's less passive aggressive stuff going on. There's less resentment like in my marriage going on. And kind of just the way that I am in relationship with like kind of everyone in the world that I run into, I'm noticing that it's less charged, and the fact that I'm allowed to be angry means that it's not as big of a deal if I am, and it's not this big thing that I'm trying to pretend I'm not. So, long explanation, going back to the main point, is I would imagine there was something about the situation of being a missionary and being so repressed in so many ways that I'm starting to say, at least in my journal and perhaps out loud, I'm starting to make jokes about like how I'm from a very intelligent family and perhaps telling other people that they're not intelligent, right? So, you don't love to see it in in your own journal, but this is the human experience, I suppose, and I guess I hope if I caught myself saying something like this now, or if someone else caught it and pointed it out to me, I would at least be a little bit more open to recognizing that it's like, oh, oops, I'm sorry, let me say that. I shouldn't say that, I would have been very defensive about getting called out about something like this, especially on my mission, because it was just the stakes of making a mistake were way too high. Okay. Also, just got to point out, there's Bonnie. I can't remember if she's a new person we were teaching or if she was a less active member. But anyway, we really wanted to bring Pearl with us, Pearl is, I think, Pearl Ikeda, who then we were talking to later. But anyway, this statement that I wrote, it will really help to have her be friends with Pearl. Taken out of context, that's not alarming. That's like, oh yeah, it's good for people to have friends. But in context, it just shows how, once again, how transactional everything about being a missionary and like interacting with other people was, and especially how like kind of manipulative everything we were doing was, and it was supposed to be this way, and we were like trained in the Preach My Gospel manual that we should, as much as we could, have members in the church who, especially if they could be friends with these new people we were teaching, it was always good to have members there, and that was like a thing we would track in our key indicators, and the more lessons we had where there was a member present, like the better. That was like a really good thing. And it was because the church knew from their own data collection, they knew that people who are either being reactivated back into church activity or people who are being baptized stick around much longer if they have a connection with someone who's in the ward. So we were saying it will help her to be friends with Pearl not because we just want her to not be lonely, but because we had this ulterior motive of making her be more in the church, right? Okay, enough said. Friday, May 29th, 2015. Mission day 231. So we're on exchanges, smiley face. I'm in Rapid City with Sister Alger, and Sister Snow is in Custer with Sister Harris. It's weird to be apart. It really helps me appreciate her, Sister Snow. We finally did comp inventory in the car, and I just had so much to say. She's so diligent and capable. We had planned to finish weekly planning in the time around dinner, but early on we called Sister Rosenberg to set up an appointment on Sunday, and we ended up going over to help her clean on her day off. They have 2 St. Bernards and 2 other large girls, aka dogs, and the first job she had us help with was scooping up the mess in the backyard and putting it in the compost bin. Fortunately, it was a beautiful day out, so that task was mostly quite pleasant, smiley face. We vacuumed and cleaned out a fish tank used for bunnies, and after other such tasks, she had dinner ready. It was so delicious. Bacon-wrapped grilled venison topped with fried onions, bell peppers, and sun-dried tomatoes, along with green salad. That's actually the first time I've had venison, and it was so good. I wonder how Sister Snow is getting along with Sister Harris. They just called with a major out-of-miles crisis, so hopefully they can sort that out. Okay, I'm just going to point out exchanges. I'm going to point out how, just like on our P-Day, my idea of what was fun and what felt like freedom was very strange. Because we were literally helping some lady clean all the dog poo out of their yard, and they had lots of dogs and very big dogs. And then we were vacuuming and cleaning out a fish tank they used for rabbits and other, just like helping her clean her house. And I can still remember like how much I loved getting to help people just like clean their house. And I don't necessarily love cleaning, especially when I was like 19. It was not something that I would do for fun. But compared to the anxiety of always needing to be finding people to teach, we didn't always have lessons all day. And even if we did, there was always the awareness in my mind that soon it was going to come up time that we didn't have anything planned. We were going to have to figure out what we were going to do. And there was all this pressure. And I was always thinking ahead of the future of like, oh no, we don't have enough people to baptize. Like, how are we going to find people? Where can we go tracting? I don't want to go tracting. But I hate tracting, but we have to do it. We have to find people. Oh, am I being obedient enough? Why aren't we finding people? Like this constant record disc of stressing and worrying about how we were spending our time and being the most diligent and effective and obedient about how we were spending our time was always going. So anytime we got a chance to do anything else was so relieving. So yeah, even though we were just cleaning up after dogs, it was, in comparison, very pleasant, which is not, I think, what most 19-year-old young women would probably say. Okay. Saturday, May 30th, 2015, mission day 232. Writing during lunch. So Sister Alger actually has 232 days left. Pretty nuts. My hump day is about her year mark. Also, we went to the library in Rapid to do family history hour. And the first thing that popped up on my homepage was a link to obituaries. Turns out that today is Grandma Katerina's birthday. She was born May 30th, 1935. There aren't any memories or pictures on her name yet, so I'm going to tell Mom to put some up. It's nice to be back with Sister Snow. Oh, so ... to show later I'm writing at the end of the day. Okay. It's nice to be back with Sister Snow. We're reading each other snippets from our patriarchal blessings. There's just something about being with your companion. We are super tight and chill, and we're unified in purpose. I love her so much. I love being a missionary, if only for the amazing sisterhood with your companion. Okay, that's what I wrote. So a little sweet moment of connection to my Grandma Katerina. But I'm not focusing on that right now because this is getting pretty long. And I gotta talk about hump day. So hump day when you're a missionary is a big deal because if you're an elder, it was easier to kind of count through and figure out what your exact middle date was. Because they were out for 2 years. But if you're a sister, we were out for 18 months, so we would be counting how we were counting every day that we were on our missions and keeping track. And when you got halfway through whatever the number was, I guess we'll find out when it's mine because I'll probably write about it. It's a big deal, and you're like, yes, I'm halfway there. Oh my goodness, I'm going to go home someday eventually. And I was kind of looking this up just to see if there's anything interesting online about it. And sure enough, not what I was expecting, something even better. For your pleasure, I've included a link to the results. I found an Etsy page that has lots of Mormon Missionary Hump Day package things. So I linked one of them, and for $10, you get the following digital download. And you print out this download, and you put it inside of the box that you send to a missionary, and then there's these cute, colorful, inspirational quotes and like cute things about it. Yeah, you made it to Hump Day, you're halfway there. And then their mom will like fill the box with candy or cookies or something. So here's one of the quotes or part of the quote. It was kind of a long quote. So here's just part of the quote that was on this specific kind of just random Etsy seller's Hump Day digital download. Quote, you only get one chance to serve a mission. It is your responsibility, your duty, to use it to its fullest, to give every last ounce of energy until you collapse in exhaustion at the end of it. All the hardships, all the tears, all the hard work will be looked back upon as the best thing you've ever done. Jeffrey R. Holland. Yeah, so a little bit more intense of a quote than I was expecting. I was like, oh man, I was kind of expecting if someone's mom is so kind of sweet and extra and over the top to not only know about Missionary Hump Day, but also like time out a package and like especially decorate the inside and like have themed candy and stuff in it. Like, I was expecting it to be like, good job, like we love our missionaries and like you're doing God's work and we're so proud of you, something like that. But no, it's like this like really heavy, intense, you only get one chance, use every last ounce of energy until you collapse in exhaustion at the end. It's like, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine. I mean, I can imagine, like, thankfully, my parents were not this intense, but clearly there are some parents who are this intense about their children being on missions, which is a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. Then, I guess going back to the journal entry, I just will mention that I was basically like, it's so nice to be friends with my companion. I even said, I love being a missionary, if only for the amazing sisterhood with your companion. Which is basically like, yeah, I can admit a little bit that it's hard to be a missionary, but it's literally all worth it because I love my companion so much and we get to do so many fun things together. Which, I mean, the fun thing we were doing was being unified in purpose. So we were both really dedicated about being missionaries. And at this point, we read each other pieces from our patriarchal blessings. And that's like a thing that is kind of taboo and forbidden to do. But sometimes if you're close with people, especially with your companions, you'll read them little pieces of what, and share back and forth little pieces of what you've been promised by God. So that's like a sort of, if you're really close and you're both LDS, you might share patriarchal blessings. I never shared my whole blessing with someone who wasn't like in my immediate family until I was engaged, and then I shared mine with my husband, which there's a bit of a story there, but another day. But yeah, I'm just like, now I can see how I could have been close friends with literally anyone, and I could have also been at home or at college, and I was like so convinced that this aspect of being close friends with someone was like there's a monopoly on this by, like, it's only if you're a missionary can you be, like, close friends with someone. And now looking back on this, I'm like, literally no. That's probably one of the worst ways to be close friends with someone, because ideally you get to be friends with someone who you both mutually actually like hanging out, and you're not just assigned to hang out all the time, but you actually have like some shared interests or something. But here we were just like, we had to be together 24/7. So of course we tried to feel like we really liked each other, and sometimes we were good friends, but I definitely have been able to experience becoming friends with someone and having a nice time when I wasn't on a mission. So that's a little bit much. All right, last day, here we go. Sunday, May 31st, 2015, mission day 233. Since we have stake conference next weekend, our Custer ward went ahead and had Fast Sunday today. Bonnie did not come, nor did the Ikedas, which was too bad since we had awesome meetings today. Sister Davis, aka the bishop's wife, taught Relief Society. We had quite amazing teach and learn by the Spirit as usual. Which was quite amazing, and taught and learned by the Spirit, as usual. We focused on finding nobility in motherhood and joy in womanhood, in quotation marks, which is one of my favorite subjects lately. I'm pretty excited to be a wife and mom, smiley face. We're over on miles for the month, so Sister Snow and I walked to church today. We had to be there at 7:45 a.m. to prepare the progress records for PEC, Priesthood Executive Council. She did a really good job today at working on a Sunday while fasting. I remember that was a hard adjustment to make. Fortunately, we both got in a solid hour-long nap during lunch, which really helped. Sister Woodworth drove us over to Adrian's for his first lesson, but he was still at work, so she drove us out lark hunting. Less active recent comfort. On the way to visit Angela Rooks, she got a little turned around in the crazy dirt road neighborhoods. While flipping the car around, the tires went too far off the road and we got stuck in the mud. So once again, I hopped right out and we pushed while she rocked until we got out. It was kind of fun, even if our shoes got pretty muddy. No tow truck needed today. While doing our afternoon studies, Sister Snow was pretty emotionally worn out. I couldn't focus at all since I was just worried about her, so we watched the district and talked about the temple. Sometimes you really just need to slow down. Okay, I'll go backwards over these. So, gotta talk about needing to slow down. I was getting a little bit more, I guess I wouldn't say that I was getting a little bit, I was just as compulsive about following the rules. I just now had a different set of rules. Because just the previous transfer, when I was the junior companion and I was in a trio, or when I was with just Sister Feist, whenever we would quote unquote slow down and like, okay, instead of like going out knocking doors or whatever, we're just going to stay home and do the comfort things of watching missionary training videos and talking about the temple, which is a whole nother topic of that's really not very good relaxing self-care, like actually, but in comparison it was what we felt comfortable doing. But before, when we were doing this kind of stuff, I hated it. It was driving me crazy. I was so upset with, like, oh no, we're not following the rules, we're not being obedient, we're not getting stuff done, oh no. But now that I was assigned to be a trainer, I knew my ultimate job was to take care of Sister Snow, and I needed to help her be well and be okay. So I was like, well, yeah, we need to always be obedient, but like she's like been sick. We were fasting all day, so that meant we probably the day before didn't eat dinner, or starting from dinner the day before, we stopped eating and drinking water. And then we went 24 hours of still working. We were on call 24/7, and we still would get up and do the same normal thing. But we just weren't eating food or drinking water, and we were even like out walking because we couldn't drive our car, right? So it was a ridiculous thing to do. And she was getting over being sick if she wasn't still sick. So of course she was just done, right? It got to the point where I was like, okay, she's done. Like we're done today. And I was so caught up in that it was like I was responsible for her, and so I was like, okay, we can slow down. So yeah, I gotta just point that out. That's all just really intense. I wanted to point out lark hunting. I don't know if that's a missionary terminology. I don't remember it, but it must be kind of creepy. But calling it lark hunting is weird. It's very dehumanizing. Lark, if you forget, means less active or recent convert. So there's this category of if you're regularly going to church, you're active. But if you don't go, or if you haven't gone in a long time, or you don't go very often, you're a subclass, less active. And if you're a recent convert, you also need help to become truly an active member. So we would have these word lists of everybody in the area who had ever been affiliated with the church, and we would go through the word lists and we would keep notes of this person, we tried knocking on their door on this day this year, they didn't answer, try back again in 6 months or whatever. And the missionaries would have these lists that we would keep track of people and go lark hunting. Yeah, laughing with discomfort. Moving backwards again, I pointed out that Sister Snow did a really good job today working on a Sunday while fasting, and remembering that I had a hard time adjusting to that. And just, yeah, it's weird looking back on this, because obviously Sister Snow and I were both in a ridiculous bad situation, but it's kind of sad to see how I was kind of complicit in her loss of humanity, and the way that they take your humanity away and kind of just totally tear you down when you're a new missionary. Because I was seeing her, I was expecting her to do all the stuff that I had been expected to do, and I was being really encouraging, and I was being a good cheerleader. I was saying, yes, good job, you're doing it. But it was what I was praising her for doing and encouraging her to do and trying to support her in doing was not healthy. So I can't look back with the pride on what I was doing in the way that I would have expected myself to at the time. When I was writing this down, I would have been proud of myself, but now I'm oh, well, I didn't set up this system, so, it's not my fault, but certainly I wasn't helping her the way that I thought I was, right? pointing out that for some reason they had to do Fast Sunday. They couldn't skip Fast Sunday, which really sucked for us because when you're missionaries, you've got to obey all the rules and you can't even somewhat cheat and just half fast. We did full 24-hour no food, no water fast. And then of course it was the end of the month and we were totally out of miles, so we had to walk. And then I just was really irritated reading that we had to get there extra early. We had to get there at 7:45 in the morning on this horrible day in order to prepare the progress records for Priesthood Executive Council. Now, what I didn't write, but what I would have known and just tried to ignore, was the fact that we were not invited to Priesthood Executive Council because we did not have the priesthood. But the elders were invited. So I hate that. If I have to explain to you why that's terrible, I'm not going to. Think through that one yourself. And I wanted to finish with the, just once again, this just always finds its way back in here. The lesson in Relief Society that week was finding nobility in motherhood and finding joy in womanhood, and how they were the same thing. Motherhood is womanhood, and it's noble and joyful. And of course it was taught by the bishop's wife, who, when your husband's called bishop, it gives you this big status, but you don't get the status besides the fact that you're attached to the man with the status, you know? It's like she got like local status in connection, but not herself. And the way that she could show that she was a good person, to be a good role model, was she could tell us all to be mothers and joyful women. And of course, you know, I'm like, yeah, this is my favorite subject lately. I'm excited to be a wife and mom. Which just shows how all this, it just keeps wrapping back up into the gender trap. the like, oh, I guess I'm gonna have to do it, so I gotta figure out how to feel good about it. And that's where a lot of my brain energy is going on my off time and when I'm not worrying about who are we going to teach, where are we going to go tracting. Oh no, I hate tracting. I was thinking about being a wife and a mother. And that's my 35th week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Ratings and reviews are very helpful, and please share this with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week, and if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye!